Imagine waking up to discover that a Labour stronghold in Wales, a seat they've held for over 15 years, has just fallen to Reform UK. Not just lost, mind you, but absolutely collapsed, with their vote plummeting by nearly 50%. That's not a swing, that's a political earthquake. Welcome to the latest chapter in British politics, where Nigel Farage's Reform UK is making serious inroads into traditional Labour territory, and Sir Keir Starmer's party is hemorrhaging support faster than a punctured tyre. Buckle up, because this result tells us something absolutely fascinating about where British politics is heading. Quick favour, if you're loving this, hit that subscribe button. Over 94% of viewers haven't yet. It's free, takes a second, and means the world to us. Cheers if you did. Now back to the show. So let's dive straight into what's happened here, because the details are absolutely jaw-dropping. Reform UK has won a crunch by-election in the Labour heartland of Wales, dealing a fresh blow to Sir Keir Starmer's party as fury mounts over council election delays and general dissatisfaction with the government. This isn't just any old council seat. This is Flintshire. This is Wales. This is territory that Labour has dominated for generations, and it's just gone Reform. Labour's vote collapsed in the Leeswood by-election as Reform gained its first ever councillor on Flintshire Council. Their Welsh candidate, Christian Solkerd, saw off competition as Labour's vote plummeted by almost 50% in this key battleground seat. 50%? That's not a bad night, that's an absolute disaster. This comes ahead of this year's Senedd elections, which are widely tipped to be a two-horse race between Nigel Farage's party and Plaid Cymru, not Labour. Think about that for a moment. Labour potentially being squeezed out of relevance in Welsh politics. Absolutely mental. But it wasn't just about Reform's victory. There was also good news for the Tories, who managed to hold on to a key seat in Cheshire, whilst Zach Polanski's Green Party saw a heavy defeat in the Cotswolds. So we've got Reform surging, Conservatives holding on by their fingernails, Greens getting battered, and Labour watching their traditional heartlands crumble. It's a proper mixed bag of results that paints quite the picture of British politics right now. Let's start with the big one, Flintshire. Reform gained its first ever councillor in the Welsh county as Christian Solkerd clinched the Leeswood ward with 22.3% of the vote in what was previously a Labour stronghold. Think about the optics of that. A seat Labour held comfortably for over 15 years just went to a party that didn't even have a councillor in the area until yesterday. That's not gradual decline, that's free fall. Independent candidate Joseph Caruana finished second with 19.2%, followed by fellow independent David Rule with 18.8%. So you've got Reform first, then two independents. Labour, they came fourth. Ray Thomas, Labour's candidate, managed just 12.1% of the vote in a Labour stronghold. Let that sink in properly. They didn't just lose, they were crushed, humiliated, relegated to fourth place behind independents in their own backyard. Alison Davies from Flintshire People's Voice got 11%, Richard Sefton from the Liberal Democrats scraped 9.5%, Oliver Martin Wilson from the Welsh Tories managed 4.7%, and independent candidate Sean Owen finished dead last on 2.4% of the vote. It's a fragmented field, absolutely, but the fact that Reform came out on top in such a crowded race makes their victory even more impressive. The by-election was triggered by the death of long-serving councillor Ray Hughes, who represented the ward for more than 15 years. 15 years of Labour representation, building relationships, delivering for the community, establishing trust, and it all evaporated in a single night. That should be sending alarm bells ringing throughout Labour HQ, because if they can lose seats like this, they can lose anywhere. Reacting to his win, Christian Solkerd was understandably delighted, saying, "Thank you so much to the residents of the Leeswood and Pontblythen ward, previously a Labour stronghold. He'd never experienced anything like it. The tension last night was electric." He thanked his brilliant team, and you can hear the genuine excitement and disbelief in those words. This is a party that's gone from nothing to winning in Labour heartlands. That's a narrative that writes itself. The turnout in the ward was 718, with Solkerd winning with a majority of just 22 votes. Now, some people might look at that and say it's a tiny majority, hardly a mandate. But here's the thing, in a crowded 8-way race, winning by 22 votes whilst taking over 22% of the vote is actually pretty solid. It shows Reform didn't just scrape over the line, they genuinely had the strongest support among a divided electorate. After yesterday's by-election, the council is still under no overall control, with Labour running a minority administration with informal support from the Liberal Democrats. So Labour's still technically in charge of the council, but their grip is weakening, their support is collapsing, and Reform now has a toehold from which to build. This is how political realignment starts, folks. One council seat here, one by-election there. Suddenly you've got momentum and credibility. At Westminster level, Labour's Becky Gittins won the newly created Clwyd East seat for Labour with a majority of 4,622 over former Vale of Clwyd Tory MP James Davis. So Labour's still winning parliamentary seats in the area, but council-level support is evaporating. That disconnect is fascinating and suggests Labour's national brand is holding up better than local satisfaction with what they're actually delivering on the ground. Yet here we are in 2026, still arguing about the fundamental architecture of our relationship with Europe. Every time a minister even whispers the words customs union, it reignites all those Brexit battles that tore communities and families apart. Kyle called it a gentle debate, but there's nothing gentle about Brexit debates in Britain. They're more like gladiatorial combat with statistics and GDP projections as weapons. What makes this situation particularly tricky for Starmer is that he's trying to perform a delicate balancing act. On one hand, he needs to reassure Leave voters, particularly in those red wall seats Labour recaptured, that he's not trying to reverse Brexit by stealth. On the other hand, the economic reality is that Brexit has created trade barriers and economic friction that many businesses find frustrating and costly. So Labour's position seems to be, we're definitely not rejoining the customs union, except we might want to have a gentle debate about it, but anyone who suggests we should is being foolish, unless they're making the point that it would be crazy not to consider it. Clear as mud, right? Kyle's comments about Turkey are particularly interesting. He noted that it took Turkey 20 years to join the customs union with the EU. That timeline is accurate, but it's also slightly misleading. Turkey's journey was complicated by numerous political factors, membership negotiations, and specific arrangements about their relationship with the EU. Britain, having recently been a full EU member with all the institutional knowledge and existing trade infrastructure, wouldn't necessarily follow the same timeline. But Kyle's point seems to be that rejoining wouldn't be quick or simple, which is probably the one thing everyone can agree on. What's fascinating about this whole debacle is how it reveals the internal tensions within Labour about Brexit. During the opposition years, Starmer has been able to maintain discipline on this issue because, frankly, nobody really cared what the opposition thought about Brexit. But now they're in government, with ministers attending international forums and making trade policy, those private disagreements are becoming public contradictions. Some Labour MPs and ministers clearly believe that closer alignment with the EU, potentially including a customs union, is economically necessary. Others believe that reopening Brexit debates would be political suicide. And Starmer is stuck in a middle, trying to keep everyone happy while maintaining those red lines he drew during the election campaign. The timing of this chaos is also rather unfortunate for Labour. They're trying to convince the country that they have a coherent plan for economic growth, that they're the stable, competent alternative to years of Conservative chaos. But when your ministers are publicly contradicting each other and themselves on fundamental economic policy, that stability narrative takes rather a battering. It's hard to convince businesses to invest and plan for the long term when the government can't seem to decide whether it's open to a customs union or considers the idea foolish utopian thinking. Kyle's insistence that he's focusing on what it takes to get growth into the economy now is telling. He's trying to pivot away from the long-term customs union question to immediate growth measures. But that doesn't really work when you've just been asked directly about the customs union and said it would be crazy not to consider it. You can't simultaneously argue that something is worth considering and that you're not going to consider it because you're focused on other things. Well, you can, but people might reasonably point out that you're talking nonsense. There's also Kyle's claim that the Brexit debate ripped our country apart, but now we are back together as a country. This is the kind of optimistic political rhetoric that sounds lovely, but doesn't survive contact with reality. Brexit didn't just create a temporary disagreement that we've all since resolved with a nice cup of tea and a biscuit. It revealed and deepened fundamental divisions about Britain's place in the world, about immigration, sovereignty, economic priorities, and national identity. Those divisions haven't magically healed because Labour won an election. They're still there, lurking beneath the surface, ready to explode the moment someone mentions customs unions or chlorinated chicken or any of the other Brexit flashpoints.